so let's start this meeting and perhaps proceed out of order to give folks just another minute to show up, but get things going in the meantime. Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Committee on Ordinance for Tuesday, January 26th. It's just after 6:30 p.m. I'm the chair, Rebecca Lisi, City Councilor at Large. We're also joined by Ward Councilor from Ward 6, who's the Vice Chair, Juan Anderson Burgos, Councilor Libby Hernandez from Ward 4, Councilor Murphy from Ward 2, and Linda Vacon from Ward 5. These are the members of the committee. Also joining us this evening, we have Mike Sullivan, Councilor at Large, Joe McGivern, Councilor at Large, and I'm not seeing other councilors, Councilor Bartley from Ward 3. Good evening, everyone. So again, I think while we're giving folks another minute or so to show up for this grants discussion, I would like to entertain a motion to proceed out of order to item number 6.
Make a motion.
Graney's here by phone, Madam Chair.
Right, I'm sorry about that, Howie. Councilor Graney is here, City Councilor at Large.
Motion we proceed out of order to take item 6.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 6. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay, so item number 6 was a zone change application from BL to BH for Holyoke Gas and Electric, and they have since requested that the application be withdrawn.
Motion to give the order leave to withdraw.
Second.
No prejudice, if I could.
Sure. The motion has been amended to withdraw without prejudice. Councilor Anderson Burgos seconded that. On the motion to give leave to withdraw to item number 6 without prejudice, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved. I see that we are now joined by Councilor at Large, Jim Leahy as well. All right, proceeding to regular order. We have item number 1. Is there a motion to take up item number 1?
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. Take up item number 1. This is an order filed by Councilors Bartley and Vacon. Order that the mayor, the auditor, and the city's financial team, as needed, provide draft internal controls on how city grants are to be administered so that future governments regarding city taxpayers are not faced with paying for administrative shortfalls. So under discussion, we can pass it over to Councilor Vacon, who is the maker on the committee. We had the auditor in last week for this discussion. Sorry, 2 weeks ago in Ordinance Committee, we had the auditor in who did create several grants procedures to begin to help close the gaps and the creation of deficits that we seem to be penalized for over the past couple of years by DOR and DLS when they're reviewing our free cash at the end of the year. So this is an administrative procedure that the auditor developed. It's going to live and breathe and stay with the auditor's office, but I think that there's an opportunity for the city council to create an ordinance that says something simple to the effect of like grants shall follow the procedure as outlined by the auditor, so that it is codified in our ordinances, but we're not overly prescriptive in what that looks like. And again, as Councilor Vacon is the maker of the order, I'll pass it over to her to give an overview of the process. The auditor did have an emergency come up where she was not able to attend this evening. So Councilor Vacon will be giving the overview in her stead.
Thank you. So I would like to lead tonight with the document that includes the ordinance language that has been sent to all of us. And I would like to offer an amendment to it where it states anyone obtaining a grant accepted by council must follow procedures as laid out by the city auditor in the grant procedure guide. I'd like to change must to shall. I'd like to make that motion to amend.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded to change must to shall. All in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. So, do you mind just, explaining the change in the language and why it's significant?
So from my perspective, from what I understand about legal language, shall is the word that has the most power in terms of requiring that the action be followed from a legal point of view. And I rather have it be stronger legal language rather than looser language relative to compliance.
Great.
So I don't know if you want a motion on adopting the ordinance before we go into the procedural discussion. It seems like that might be in order. So
Yeah,
I'd like,
I think
like
we
to
should have a discussion.
okay, so I would like to offer the motion that we adopt the ordinance as amended.
Second.
Again.
Motion has been made and seconded. However, under discussion, I think we want to have the discussion here to make sure that everybody understands what the procedure is, and then we
Sure.
brought the mayor in as well as the department heads to make sure that everybody would understand the procedure,
Sure.
be able to ask any questions, and make sure that we could get compliance moving forward.
Sure. I do want to be clear, though, that in terms of compliance, it will be the auditor's office, not the city council.
Mhm.
And so the purpose of the meeting tonight is for understanding, but not compliance. And so for the public record, I would appreciate it if those department heads that are in attendance that have grants would make themselves known so that can be part of our record tonight for the meeting.
Mhm.
So if they can let Jeffrey know, I'm not sure that all department heads have grants, but those that do, this would pertain to. So that would be appreciated. So,
This is Maria from the Holyoke Public Library. I'm sorry. This is Maria from the Holyoke Public Library. We sometimes apply for grants.
thank you.
Aaron
I
Vega.
think that Councilor Vacon is just asking department heads to make themselves known for the record so that we know who's here.
Would you
Right,
want them
and-
to chat or do you want it audio?
And if they want to use chat to give the information to Jeffrey so that he can put it in the minutes, that's fine with me. I just want it in the record who was at the public meeting and has become aware of the procedures through this method. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
So as was presented to us at the last meeting, and to which we had offered some suggestions and changes, Tanya has provided, to my understanding, all of us on the committee and all of the department heads that have grants with this new updated procedure. So I would like, by a show of hands or in some way, to verify that those department heads here tonight have in fact received these documents. However, the chair wishes to ascertain that.
So for the department heads, I can call on you, I guess. That's one way of going through it, just to see if you have you been in receipt of this new grants procedure from the auditor's office. So at the top of my list, I see Tony, you're available. Have you seen the grants procedure?
Yes, I've seen all the paperwork for those.
Great.
But
Aaron
my
Vega
office
is
has
writing that he
no grants.
And Alex Morse, our mayor, is writing that Tanya sent to all department heads via an email on January 20th. So it seems that everybody should be in receipt.
Okay. And so I guess the next question being that it's only the 25th, I think we need to understand if the department heads have reviewed these documents at this point.
Can I ask whoever is there, I can hear in the background their TV or something. Can you please put yourself on mute? Thank you.
I think we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, so have we gotten confirmation that everybody on this meeting has had a chance to review the documents?
I guess we can ask people to put into the chat if they have been able to review the document yet.
I have not.
Okay, so that was the library. Let's see. I don't
It
see
only went out
anybody.
on the 20th, I think, right?
Yeah, it just went out on the 20th.
So I think we.
Okay, so I'm just interested to know because it is informing me as to how much detail I want to go into with the overview tonight for this meeting. And since it seems that perhaps not many folks have had an opportunity to review this, I think we should go over it in more depth to assure that there is an understanding of the purpose of the ordinance and the meaning of the ordinance. So the first document that I'd like to review is the Grant Procedure Guide, effective January 20, 2021. And this talks about grant acceptance and expenditure accounting fund setup. And this is where we need to comply with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, 53A, which requires that all grants and gifts must be brought before the City Council for vote for departments to be able to move forward with the expenditure for the grant purpose. And so to achieve that, all grant documentation must be forwarded to the auditor's office to get the grant onto the agenda for a vote. And the documentation needs to include the signed contracts, fiscal responsibilities, timeline, budget, any municipal match required, and reimbursement information if it is a reimbursable grant. And the mayor's signature of approval is always necessary. Now, we are aware that lots of times we get grants very late coming through to us. And so I think to start out on the right foot with getting these things timely will help to avoid accounting problems later on. And so as part of this procedure, the auditor is asking department heads to be sure to plan accordingly relative to the grants. And so the normal process for grant acceptance is a submission to City Council via the meeting agenda, referred to the Finance Committee for evaluation and discussion and recommendation, and then back to the City Council for a full council vote. So once the grant is approved, the auditor's office then sets up the fund for the expenses and revenues, and a chart of grant accounts is then sent to the department once the fund is set up for use. In this procedure, the auditor states if you need additional accounts added for revenues or expenses to please contact the auditor. So until the council accepts the grant by vote, a grant which you will manage spending from that grant, or by natural extension, requesting reimbursements from the grantor for spending related to that grant that is charged off to another account or fund is not allowed. So that's why it's important to get this authorized and set up timely. Such unauthorized activity is a violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. Compliance with this law and our procedures for executing such compliance are critical internal financial and administrative controls established for everyone's protection. And as a side comment, this is something that has been brought to our attention repeatedly from DOR. Now, this next section on reconciliation is very important. And it talks about once spending ensues, grant managers should begin a monthly reconciliation process for each grant. Whether you have one-year grant or multiple, it is important to reconcile expenses on a monthly basis. The reason for this is the further out of compliance a grant gets, the harder it is to go back in and reconcile. And we've all been made aware of that from our auditor by the hundreds of hours spent when we're trying to close our books and get our free cash certified. So under this procedure, during the first week of each new month for the life of a grant, a reconciliation should be completed for the prior month. 2 Munis manuals are provided with these procedures to assist you in your reconciliation. And those were included on the documents that I received from the auditor, so you all should have them. One is the account inquiry and the other is the year-to-date report. If you need additional information or reporting, please contact the auditor's office. I'm sure Tanya will help you if you need some technical support in terms of using Munis. So what this monthly reconciliation should include is all actual expenditures processed through the finance department, plus any authorizations, obligations, unobligated balances, program income and interest if applicable. All budget categories such as personnel, fringe benefits, supplies, equipment, etc., should be checked for accuracy. If something is charged incorrectly or a revenue is posted inaccurately, the department should notify the audit office in writing of the error and provide proper backup documentation, such as invoices, payroll reports, etc., for a journal entry to be processed. This should be done promptly so that records are accurate in the Munis system. After corrections are made, the department should make the final check to ensure entries were processed correctly. So the auditor is going to be controlling the accounts and updating the accounts, but it is up to the grant manager to be providing accurate information in support of the grants, because you as grant managers are the ones that have the access to the day-to-day and month-to-month information. So in the procedure, it then goes on to say, repeat the process again for next month and thereon until the end date of the grant. So proper reconciliation assists to ensure that costs are consistent with the project schedule and incurred between the start and stop dates of the project. Discover any errors in your budget, encumbrances, or expenditures. Errors can be caused by a service department, an end user, or a system-generated issue. The longer an error remains uncorrected, the harder it is to show that allowability and allocatability of it. Confirm that the availability of project funds as needed. Avoid overspending, which may cause a deficit and limit further spending. Verify that corrections and cost transfers have been made or are made in a timely manner, and maintain good documentation for an audit if one should occur in the future. Then the procedure goes on to grant revenues, reimbursements. The proper coding for grant revenue is pertinent to the financial success of the grant fund. A file has been created on the S drive called Cash Receipts that the city will use to track revenue and reimbursement documentation. Be labeled date of documentation, dollar figure, grant.
I don't think we need that level of detail in the
and
overview.
The other technical aspects that would relate to your specific grant or grants. And so there's an example provided there so the grant managers can see how that appears in the system. If you need additional support relative to that, then the auditor is available to you in that regard. For the year-end reporting, any city department of which has received grant funding by approval of the city council pursuant to Mass General laws shall within a reasonable period of time, but no later than 60 days from the conclusion of said grants, generate a detailed report which outlines the planned outcomes with the documented actual results. Said report shall be submitted to the city clerk for addition to the city council next agenda. Once city council has concluded its discussion of the report, it shall be posted on the city website for a minimum of 2 weeks for the general public. I will note that the auditor has provided a grant completion form for each grant manager. It's referenced here in the procedure and it's attached along with the procedure that you have all received. This is to help you complete the reports in an easier fashion and in a consistent manner so that we can hopefully have good compliance and avoid the hundreds of thousands of dollars of write-offs that we have had. So the auditor in the procedure is saying, please fill out the Holyoke grant completion form and return it to the auditor's office within 60 days of the end of your grant term, and has provided that document. Flagging of fund deficits. This is a significant development that will help us control for these grants. Deficit funds will be monitored by the auditor's office and flagged when questions arise about deficit balances and reimbursed revenue. Flags will not allow for continued processing of expenses. If you find your fund to be flagged, contact the auditor's office and be prepared to discuss budget figures so that the account can then be freed and be continued to be used for the purpose for which it was approved. So in the interest of being thorough, I wanted to go through this procedure in the public meeting. It has had input, as I understand it, from grant managers, from members of the Ordinance Committee, and anyone else who wished to chime in. I thank Councilor Bartley for filing this. I was happy, as someone who has been pursuing accountability with the grant monies, to be a co-sponsor of this order. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I see Councilor Bartley is on the call also. Thank you.
Right, and just because you just went through the entire procedure here, and I know that the mayor had some input into the development of this. I'd like to just turn it to the mayor to see if we could get some reactions and thoughts about what the grant procedure looks like from his perspective.
Thank you, Councilor. Don't have much input other than the text of the procedure and document that was sent by the city auditor to the department heads on the 20th. I appreciate the department heads and the city staff that are here this evening who understand the implementation of this, and we'll have some time to review it and get back to Tanya if there's any concerns or questions. I don't disagree with the council codifying the procedure and appreciate the interest from councilors in doing so, given the impact that improper grant filing and reporting has affected the city's free cash in recent years. So that's all I have to say at the moment.
Great, thank you. And I just do want to reiterate that the way that we're crafting this as an ordinance is just saying that the procedure shall be followed as outlined by the auditor. So, you know, this document may change over time with feedback and discussion with the auditor. You know, we're not micromanaging the way that they're being, the grants are being managed in each department, and we're not micromanaging the way the auditor's doing this sort of end of the management. We just want to make sure that something is codified, and you know, I think that the first couple of months or even into the first year is going to be sort of a tweaking of the process based on experience. So the feedback will be appreciated. Councilor Bartley, as the other maker of the order, do you want to make any comments at this point?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just figure out how to turn off my, oh God, I gotta get used to this new stuff here. Okay, all right. Yes, so you can see in the actual language of the order itself, it was to allow the department heads, specifically the auditor and the mayor's department, to come up with internal controls to deal with it. So this is definitely not about micromanaging from city council. It's about lighting a fire under them based upon what we've seen the last couple of budgets, as the mayor rightly pointed out, that we have grants that are not properly administered for a variety of reasons, and it's impacted the financial ability of the city to do things that we want to see happen. At this point, I just want to thank profusely Councilor Vacon for carrying the ball a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't, I just had a family matter I had to deal with, and I thank her for getting through all this. Also, great thanks to the auditor, our appointee, for her diligence, not only her diligence, but her recognition of the seriousness of this matter. And then on top of that, I think she went above and beyond the call of duty to doing this. I just want to point out, lastly, a couple items that I'd like the Ordinance Committee to consider amending. The word anyone obtaining a grant, I would suggest that the language should be any city department And I say that because the first three words of the grant completion form are any city department. It said anyone is a little bit, it's just kind of vague. And so I would ask us to consider amending that. Relative to the verbiage grant procedure guide, as the chair pointed out, we're not micromanaging, but the committee may, if the solicitor thinks that it's wise, I don't know if that's the best, but the solicitor may recommend something like this: the grant procedure guide should be defined, and then it could be defined as a guide to be developed by the city auditor and may be amended from time to time. Those are a couple things that a lot of times in legislation we just, it's good to sometimes have a definition table, and it's good to make it without getting into super weeds here, just kind of give some context. So I would ask you to consider amending anyone to any city department, and then I would ask you to consider putting some context to the words grant procedure guide. If you're not going to define it in the actual ordinance, you might want to set up another section with a definition table, and the definition table could then be more easily amended and pointed out to. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Bartley, where are you looking at any one as opposed to any city department?
The
in which
ordinance
section?
Well, the actual ordinance, the draft ordinance, I should
It's
say.
not in the document. Okay, that's fine. Now I understand. I thought you were talking about within the document.
Okie dokes.
Thank you. Councilor, I'm sorry. Planning and Economic Development Director, Aaron Vega, and then Councilor McGivern, I see you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the new process coming in, and I'm meeting with Tanya next week, and plan to have a department meeting with Tanya to kind of go over it. So we're excited about it. I just want to point out too, coming into this new, we want to work together with the city council, and so often, there's timelines unfortunately a lot of these grants, and you'll notice corresponding to my predecessor Marcus Marrero indicating a few issues that you may have had with in the OPED office. It was just reimbursements. They're coming, and unfortunately they didn't get by the fiscal year. So often we get approved, coming from the state, and I get it, we'll approve a state grant in February, but it goes through the city council, goes through the process. If we don't get approval till March or beginning of April, we have 2 or 3 months to spend it. It's that reimbursement time that creates the issue with free cash. So just look forward to working with all of you, but hopefully that you're mindful as department heads come to you when there's timelines, especially if it's in the fiscal year timelines on these grants. So just want to keep that in mind, because again, my understanding, the ones from OPED there's a handful, small handful that maybe didn't come in on time, but the reimbursements are coming in. It's just after the fiscal year. So it does create the issue that I know you're trying to deal with free cash. But again, sometimes there's holdups at the local level as well. So just want to open up the conversation to work together as we continue to look for grants, because the only way we can get things done, especially in my office, I can't speak for any other department, but more than half the work, I would say, out of my office is coming out of grants.
Thank you. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor Lisi. Just a couple of notes. One, is anybody here from the school department?
No, but we should check.
That's a major gap in what we're trying to do here this evening. They have a lot of grants that contributed over the last 2 years and probably more to some of these deficits. And it's sad because right now we're in receivership and we have no voting on the acceptance of grants. The school committee cannot vote or supervise the line item control of grants. And yet at the end of the year, the Department of Local Services can penalize us. I think that in the area of the school department, perhaps DLS should be penalizing themselves because the state is not managing the state. I'd like to say, to our department heads who are here, this language, there are 2 city councilors saying it's not micromanaging, and I agree with them. We are not here to micromanage, but we have the responsibility of allowing grants to be accepted. we're very close to denying any future grants if this doesn't stop. And I've heard, and Aaron, you make a good point, and I've heard it from the police department and the fire department and the DPW, that a lot of these reimbursements are coming in after June 30th, and a lot of these reimbursements are cleared up. They're not cleared up if the managers don't do it in a timely fashion. And Councilor Vacon read the words that are so important, is do this monthly, just like it's your own checkbook. When there's a problem, you contact and flag the auditor before the auditor flags you. And then you can correct that in the month or 2 months. And when the audit comes time for an audit, it's not a problem. This is mostly just simple accounting procedure, and all managers, any department head, and whoever you designate to be your manager of grants should understand this. Mass General Laws 44 is simple 101 municipal financing. Mass Munis is complicated. You need help to use Mass Munis. We understand that. Our designated person has been Katie Jakowski. There's other people who are more proficient with the Mass Munis system, but Mass General Finance is simple 101. There is no excuse, even when the outside independent auditor who is currently Melanson and Heath flags something wrongly, that can be corrected if you're looking at this on a monthly basis. No, I'm not micromanaging, but this is macro management, and sadly, we have to macromanage because we've lost the ability to use millions of dollars, which means you as head have lost the free cash that we could be using to be putting into the accounts of this year's budget that are running deficits in terms of like overtime, a number of different things that snow removal, things that are needed just for daily operation functions of the city itself. Again, timely management is a key, but I want to point out something too. This is not just something that happens on June 30th every year. That's what starts the audit. A lot of these deficits years prior that still haven't been corrected. These deficits go back 3 or 4 years and have yet to be corrected. This is accounting. You know, it's not missing cash. It's missing accounting of cash. When you can't account for cash, it's missing. So let's get this together. Let's show that we're the greatest city in the Western Massachusetts that can handle this, and let's get back to normal where we have, because you do a great job of managing your budgets, because we know that of the money that gets turned in for free cash. We lost $2 million this year. It wasn't all grant deficits, but we lost $2 million that been used from last year, free cash that could have been used this year. I'm going to stop there, but we are getting dangerously close to not worth accepting a grant if we can't manage it.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Councilor Greenie, I have you in queue. I'll take Captain Hart, however, who had his hand up first.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. If I may, I just want to make some suggestions, and I agree with the council that this is not micromanaging, and these grants definitely need some type of policy and guidelines which you created. In the past, guidelines for the city, it was very vague and maybe a paragraph or two long. So with that said, I'd like to make reference to the chapter 44, section 53A that she references in the guide. And in there, it talks about a provision that the city council may create an ordinance to help with this end of year annual tax rate where these grants are affecting the free cash. And I believe this is what Brian Smith may have been doing in the past, where we've seen a significant amount of free cash being certified. And that was where some of these grants weren't counted towards the annual tax rate. some of these grants have been 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 years that were actually grant awards. And let's take, for example, year 1 of a 5-year grant. At the end of June 30th, if you're in a $30,000 or $80,000 deficit, and you're about to do a reimbursement in July, and if they use that $80,000 or whatever it is in deficit towards the tax rate, it's definitely going to affect it. However, you know that we have 4 more years on this grant to go. So instead of taking that $80,000 away from the city and not being able to account for it until the next fiscal year, these are provisions where you can put in place that those multi-year grants should not be counted towards the annual tax rate, because now we have in place a flag section. So if you bypass those multi-year grants that may be in deficit, but you know you have 2 or 3 more years to go, and after the 2 months or 3 months, the auditor can simply put a flag on it and stop that account immediately, and then the reimbursements can come in. However, the city would still be allowed to use that $80,000 in that fiscal year because it wasn't counted towards the tax rate. So I hope everyone followed that, and that's just one suggestion I have now. As we talk further, I may have some more suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Sergeant Hart, if I may, and I'm sorry, is it Sergeant or Captain? I feel like it just
Sergeant.
Yeah, Sergeant Hart. Thank you. So, are you under the impression that there is something already in the ordinance that was allowing us under Brian Smith to create those sort of provisional bypasses, or is it just an internal procedure? Because
actually, I wasn't. I didn't receive the ordinance. All I have is the grant procedure guide.
Mm-hmm. When I look at the ordinance, it's just new language. So I was just wondering if you are under the impression that there was something written in ordinance form previously that Brian was using to create those bypasses, or if it was just a procedure that he was using in his office without, an actual ordinance that governed it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't referenced any or saw any ordinance to say that.
All right, we'll ask Crystal about that in just a moment. Aaron, I see your hand up. I'm not sure if you had it up from before or if this is a new hand raise.
No, previous. You're good. Thank you.
I am going to ask you a question then, based on your comment from before, if you don't mind. What is that?
Councilor Greeny's waiting.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm sorry. I left him off my list here.
Okay.
Councilor Greeny, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Vega.
Yep.
Councilor Greeny.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to express, my agreement with Councilor McGivern. I don't know if the school department people were invited to this meeting or not, but it's a major problem with the grants citywide, and the school department certainly is one of the most prolific grant writers that we have. And once again, my feelings toward the school department and, personal feelings about the receivership, et cetera, where we don't have any local control over the situation exacerbates this situation. Once again, at some point in time, I'm hoping that the city founding fathers are going to come to their senses, and we will retake our school system and be able to have direct contact with the people who are running our school department, and that the citizens in this city will have a say as to what's going on in the schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Greeny. So my question for Mr. Vega. Such a strange
You
transition.
call me
to
Aaron.
here. Sorry about that.
Once a rep, always a rep, but you can call me Aaron. It's fine.
So Rep Vega, you made some points about, making sure that things aren't delayed up front with the council. And I know that there's often times where things are coming in at the last minute for council approval, and it does make things a bit difficult for the council to be able to approve things in a timely fashion and feeling like we have the information we need to move things forward. But I'm going to imagine that what's happening is the grants aren't being put before the city council until we know that they're approved. And then there's probably a short timeline in between when you actually get notification from the grantor and when that sort of approval has to happen. So I wonder if there's a way that we could get the information sort of queued up, even if it's not passed, so that we can say, like, you've gone after these grants, even if we don't know that we've had them, so that when they come through, the approval can be somewhat, automatic, because we would have learned about it already. Or if there's just too many applications out there and too few grants actually being granted to make that sort of like preemptive process worthwhile.
No, I think that you're onto something. I can't speak on what the process would be at this point, being on day 2, but I know that, in talking to Yoni and the Conservation Commission, I know that he's going to be coming to you with the grant that we're going to get approved for. And I encourage him to send something early. And so but you got to let us know who we send it to. I mean, with all due respect, you get a lot of emails, we get a lot of emails. If we send you something in hopes of getting it approved quickly, but it's supposed to go to committee, it just takes time. So, and a lot of it's not on us. A lot of it is, you're right. We're applying for grants now that we won't hear about for 6-7 months. That's the next fiscal year. We'll hear about it probably in December. And then the process of getting it all worked out, we won't even have anything to come to you officially till February. But absolutely, if there's some kind of queuing system or holding place you want to send emails to say, hey, FYI, we're applying for these grants. I'm meeting with Lori tomorrow, Lori Belanger, our purchasing director, to find out a little bit about the reimbursement issues that she's had. So yeah, I'm all about heads up, absolutely. So if you want to create a little bit of a process like that, but you will probably get inundated. I mean, we apply for a lot of grants. We don't get them all, but we get a lot. I will also say the state Governor Baker just put out a new streamlined process for applying for a number of workforce and economic development grants that my office, especially with John Dijek, apply for, and Cynthia Espinosa apply for often. So there's going to be a streamlined process for that, which will hopefully speed it up at the state level. So hopefully give us more time at the local level. Right. But very often, as you know, we get a grant approved in March and we got to spend it by July. And then we got to come to you. So we actually don't get approval till April. And now you've got 3 or 4 months at best. So it's I think the department heads, again, just coming to it fresh, the department heads seem to be in a little bit of a rock and a hard place, dealing with the timeline from the state or wherever they're getting the grant, and then the process at the local level. But happy to work with you on some kind of information. Hey, FYI, absolutely.
Right, and that's why I think it's important that the auditor is going to have the ability to change this procedure without having to go through a city council process to sort of overhaul everything. So I think that feedback from department heads is going to be essential, and we should do a review in 6 months to a year to just check in and see how things are going. Councilor McGivern and then Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. Just a couple things on just more recent comments. Well thought out, and I understand it, but let's just step back a second. Mass General Laws 44, the municipal finance law, we're not rewriting that. Google it, read it, understand it, and that's how you do business. We're not monitoring the grant process of how you manage a grant. We're monitoring an appropriation that the mayor puts in front of us after you get the grant. You're the designees of the mayor as department heads, and whoever you designate within your department, only the mayor can put this grant as an appropriation in front of us. Now, it doesn't seem like that, but that's the way it always is. It comes under the name of the chair of the finance committee and the city council because it has to be in certain language. The language is put together by the auditor. The language is almost identical every time we do this. We're setting up a fund that allows you to administer and spend the proceeds of said grant, and to be able to do it in a timely fashion. But you must reconcile the grant as managers. And I appreciate the fact Brian Smith didn't have an ordinance. Brian Smith went above and beyond the call of duty because he worked 60 hours a week, and he took care and quite frankly, he spoiled all of us. He spoiled you as department heads. He spoiled us as city councilors, and he spoiled every mayor that he worked with because he did more than an auditor should do. The mayor had to appoint in the vacancy when Brian left an acting auditor who did the best he could, but he didn't pay any attention to the grants while he was there. So for the last 6-7 years, we've dug a hole we have to get out of. You're the managers. It's your job to manage the grant, just like you manage your checkbook. We just approve the appropriation, and when DLS and when our outside audit comes back, we look at what their annual reports are. We look at what they certify as free cash, and when they tell us we can't certify free cash because you have too much in deficit, that's the problem. But we cannot do your jobs. The auditor will work with you, but if you don't do this on a monthly basis and let the auditor know this is a 5-year grant, we're going over into year 2, help me reconcile this on June 30th. That's your job as the manager. You know, I don't think DLS is completely right in the decisions they made the last 2 years, but at the same time, they're pointing this out, and I think we all know what DLS wants to do, which is would destroy the type of government we have here and would change everything that you do as department heads. So please heed this as a friendly reminder of what it takes to be a department head and to manage these grants. It's the mayor who initiates the appropriation, and it's the city council that just gives it approval. We're getting to a point where it's going to be hard to approve grants if you're not listening.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. Councilor Sullivan, and then Councilor Vacon.
You were going to go to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your hand wasn't up anymore, so I thought you were
already recognized me. I was taking it down, so I wouldn't leave it there.
Being efficient.
Councilor Murphy, and then Sullivan, and then Vacon.
You know, I'm becoming very good at this kind of stuff. I kind of like the idea that was just discussed there for 2 reasons. Number one, I mean, clearly, if we know departments are applying for a grant, whether they got it or not, yes, it may require us to do a little bit more work, but if in fact, we would then know what's coming down, if it's going to cost us anything, is there going to be any match, we would know all that ahead of time. And when it did come before the full city council, we would be in a position where we could actually just deal with it right there in city council. So whenever that grant was finally granted, we would be in a position to accept it, which would, dealing with what Aaron just talked about, would be in a position to put us, all right, you got the grant, make sure you're managing it correctly, here it is, and not take another month before they can use the money or whatever. And I don't know if that's been a problem. Obviously, it's been an issue, whether it's been the reason. Obviously, we need to follow all these other procedures. But if we could do that, if departments just came to us and we're applying for these 3 grants, this is what we're asking for, this would be a match if we had to have a match, and we got that information, we could have the hearing beforehand. 2 of them they got, the grant they did not get, then obviously those 2 would come before us, and we would already know we're either going, and they would also know, well, city council is not too much in favor of that grant for whatever reason. I just think that's an idea worth considering and smoothing or accelerating the process. And again, once that grant is there, they would already be in a position to start spending it as soon as it went to city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Sullivan, and then Vacon.
I just wanted to make one observation as far as an earlier comment about grants coming in, before the council in March and then not being approved till April. That's making it sound like we've got a 60-day window. And one thing I've seen I'm in my 6th year on the council now, is Councilor McGivern does an excellent job as the chair of the Finance Committee. When they come to the Finance Committee, in my experience right now, with the exception of just one grant, all right, they fly through, they come right through, they're immediately on the agenda and go right straight to City Council. I'd say most of them are turning around in anywhere from as low as a 2-week period to not more than 30 days. So I think the council and the Finance Committee has done an excellent job on expediting these once they get to us.
Thank you. Councillor Vacon and then Councillor McGivern. And then we do have outside counsel waiting to discuss the salary study with us. So I'm hoping that now that we're getting to third comments from the same sort of folks, that we might be able to start wrapping up a bit. So go ahead, Councillor Vacon.
I'd like to defer to Councillor McGivern because my purpose in being in the queue is to offer amendments to the ordinance.
Thank you, Councillor McGivern. And then it looks like Sergeant Hart, you're in queue as well again.
I think Councillor Sullivan said it, and I'm not taking credit. I think the Finance Committee, you know, once we put our agendas together, we receive these appropriations and we turn them around in 2 weeks. There's one grant a couple of years ago, which we held for another 2, maybe another 4 weeks, which was the Shannon grant. The reason we held up that grant is there was questionable money being spent on restorative justice. We wanted to know more about it because of an incident at the high school. And there was money that was going out to third parties, which is what the Shannon grant does, including the city of Chicopee. Now, I asked then and got an answer, which turned out to be untrue, is that if we are being used by the state to funnel money through to the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, the city of Chicopee, South Holyoke Initiative, and so on, are we responsible if those parts of the grant go into deficit? And I was told, no, we're just funneling the money through as one lump sum going out to these parties who applied for the money. Well, check, lo and behold, what happened this year, and we find out that no, that's not the case. We can be held responsible. So yes, we turn things around in 2 weeks. It's not the incoming that's a problem. It's the management at the end of the fiscal year and even after that, because like I said, some of these grants are in deficit for 3 to 4 years, still haven't been corrected. Now, I'm just starting to get redundant, but if you think the problem is the Finance Committee turning these things around, take another look. We don't have Brian Smith with us anymore. We need managers in the department to manage their budget. The mayor is the ultimate chief financial officer. It's the mayor who's going to oversee these department heads. And I know you meet with, I always know that mayors have weekly finance committee meetings with their department heads to see where things are. A great time to bring up the grant issues if there's anything, a great time to discuss what grants you want to apply for and how you want to use them. It's simple 101 municipal financing. We can create all the ordinances we want. They don't change Mass General Law 44. We have a charter that connects us with the state. Mass General Law trumps any ordinance that tries to make it stronger than Mass General Law. We could probably do a better job at writing Mass General laws, but that's not our job. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergeant Hart.
Hi, thank you. Just going back to the grant process, I think the council's doing a fabulous job in hearing the grants. They've come a long way since I've been doing it. And there is a process that if there is an emergency and you need to get the grant approved, you can always suspend the rules at the full city council meeting. And I appreciate that. And I know that the council has done that in the past for those emergency grants. But I agree with Councilor Sullivan and McGivern that they've been doing a great job in processing the grants as quickly as possible. On the other note, what I mentioned before, that's just an option for the city council. We could be the best grant managers in the world and be on top of every single grant. But like Aaron had mentioned, state grants and other grants that get reimbursed to the city out of our control, we don't submit or we don't request any reimbursements from these state grants. So they send the reimbursements when they send them. So to my point earlier was, if we have a state grant that's in deficit, $80,000, now that's going to be held against us. If we, as long as we have an option to maybe bypass that, because we don't know when the state grant is going to come in to reimburse that. But now it's going to be used against the free cash for the current fiscal year. If you have an option, at least you don't have to use it, but it's there at your disposal. If the auditor decides to bypass it, or the external auditor to utilize that ordinance that's in place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I think, you know, I'm interested in looking into that further, because I think that is the exact mechanism that's missing and causing these accounts to go into deficit. Councilor Vacon.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments that have been made. I just would like for tonight for us to keep our eye on the ball, which is for the internal controls. There are many variables with the grant management, but we know that we have some internal matters to clean up. And so I'm hopeful and encouraged, and I want to express my great appreciation to our auditor, who really was proactive in this regard, seeking approval from the mayor to have controls in her department relative to these grant accounts. And so we have a motion on the floor. I would like to offer 2 amendments to that motion. One, that we strike anyone at the beginning of the new language and substitute any city department. And 2, that we add after grant procedure guide to be developed by the city auditor that may be amended from time to time. Do I have a second on that?
Well, I think it just feels a little bit redundant on the second one, because it says we must follow the procedures as laid out by the city auditor in the grant procedure time. And then that's where we want to say, which may be amended from time to time.
Well, then we could say as developed and laid out by the city auditor in the grant procedure guide, which may be amended from time to time, if you like that better.
Yep, that's fine. And I heard a second.
Yep.
If there's no objections, I'll take a vote on both those changes together. So the motion has been made and seconded to amend the language in those 2 different ways. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
And then I'd like to offer a motion to pass the ordinance as amended.
Is there a second?
Good. I would support the ordinance, but right now I would just like to give one more, to table this 1 meeting, just to make sure all the department heads have a full time to go through this in case there's any things that we should be discussing. If not, then at the next meeting, I would certainly go ahead with the full ordinance. Knowing that they only got, and there's a lot of pages in it. I would just like to have, if they have any concerns or objections or whatever, that we give them 2 weeks to look at it, and then take it to the full city council with the ordinance as amended, if that would be okay. I'm a little uncomfortable just going now until they have a chance to review them. That's just my view.
If I may.
Councilor Vacon.
Thank you. I urge the committee to recommend this out to the city council. This has been under discussion now for 2 years. We have had adequate and ample opportunity for each and every department head to participate. The auditor has an open door policy. If they have any questions, she's made it abundantly clear that they can seek guidance and technical support from her. I see this as an ongoing routine part of the duties of a department manager. This is nothing extraordinary or unusual, and they should not need any further time in this regard. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm of the mind that we can pass it, and it'll come to the full city council next week. So there would still be a week for department heads to give comments and feedback, and send them to the council if they had any concerns, and then we could always table it there if it was necessary. But it does seem that the ordinance itself is straightforward, and the grant procedure is something that the auditor will have control of beyond us. Councilor McGivern, is your hand up for this?
I agree with Councilor Vacon, Councilor Lisi, and if we.
Yep, you just hit mute.
Sorry, I was trying to get rid of my hand. If we could pass it this evening, because what we're doing here, and I call it macro management from afar, if you know the difference between micro and macro. But what we're doing here is endorsing the auditor to do her job, giving the mayor, some tools that we agree with the auditor, because eventually the grants have to come in front of us as appropriations. We are not managing, nor can we, nor should we, managing the grants. We see it after the fact, not before the fact. We see a need, because what we're finding out from internal audits and from the Division of Local Services is that there are problems in this area. 12 months ago, I was very upset when DLS took away free cash to the tune where we came down to negative free cash. As Councilor Bacon has pointed out correctly, it's not like it started 12 months ago. It started several years ago when we didn't fill the position of when Brian Smith left, and we didn't fill that position because for a period of time, and I'm not faulting anyone except that the work wasn't done in its entirety, this hole was created and this black hole has gotten bigger. These are internal controls, of the auditor. These are internal controls to be managed by the mayor over department heads and department heads that do the managing. We're just endorsing it. We're not creating it. It's all in Mass General Law 44. It's just finance 101. Get to it and start doing your jobs.
So on Councilor Bacon's motion, is there a second from the committee? I'll second it. So the motion has been made and seconded to adopt the ordinance as amended. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Where is everybody?
I don't know. Councilor Murphy, you're the only one that I heard who was concerned, so I just want to make sure that I'm not missing a nay.
I said aye.
Okay, so then I'm going to assume that that's a 5-0 vote in favor of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the grant procedure discussion, and we'll be moving on in the regular order of our agenda. It seems that we could suspend the necessary rules and take up items numbers 2, 3, and 4 together.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to take up items 2, 3, and 4 under the suspension of our rules. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. So items number 2 is that we adopt the classification and compensation plan and the new salary ordinance and miscellaneous salary schedules based on the HRS study. Item number 3 is filed by Leahy and Roman, that we take up the salary study and adopt it in 2018. And then item number 4 is filed by Councilor McGivern, that we amend Schedule B in that original study to reflect new salaries for the elected officials. We've had a lot of discussion about this, these salary study orders, and I think we've made a lot of progress. We started hearing, qualitative accounts of what was going on in every department and the way that salaries were affecting departments and their ability to retain and attract talent, the way that different projects are getting stuck and delayed in our departments because of a lack of continuity, and the loss of institutional knowledge on how things are to proceed. And from there, we were able to look at the 2015 HRS Salary Study and the schedule that was created by HRS in 2015, and then our Human Resources Director, Personnel Director, Hector Carrasquillo, was able to extrapolate that data to the present date, assuming that there were 2% COLAs given every year, which is essentially reflective of where the COLAs across the state have been over that six-year period. We actually called HRS to make sure that that methodology was appropriate, and they said as long as we're attaching these COLAs to the actual schedule and not to the data itself, it was fine. And really, we're coming at the end of the life of this salary schedule. So if we go to 7 or 8 years, it's really going to be outdated, and you can no longer sort of use the data and the schedule in the same way. So we have a new schedule prepared. We've changed it from a salary schedule to a hiring schedule based on the last meeting conversation. And this was in regards to, it seemed one of the sticking points in actually moving forward and buttoning up the whole thing were the desire for the council to have some sort of budgetary controls. So a way to ensure that new hires weren't just, randomly assigned to the top of the new range, that there were some controls in place. And for that, we had Russell Dupere come in. He's outside counsel. He's on the call this evening, and what he suggested at that point in time is that we think of the salary and compensation schedule as a hiring schedule, and we set limits for where people could be hired into the range, and then additionally things such as longevity, COLAs, and other like educational or residential incentives that were given to our employees do not count towards the cap of the range. So he's here this evening, and I think this is a great place to sort of pick things up. We have a draft ordinance with the new numbers reflected in it, as well as the budgetary control ordinance language that Russell has developed. So if you would, Russell, under suspension of the rules, if we may, we have the suspension already. So why don't you walk us through the ordinance itself? And for anyone who's looking at the drive and needs to help navigate it all, so you go to salary documents, and the ordinance that we're looking at is the Word document. So it says not adopted at the top, and then it talks about section 2-35.
Okay, would you like me to share my screen and I can walk through?
Yes, please. I'm having trouble accessing the drive.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. Do you have the ability to do that?
Yes, it looks like I do now. Let's see. Okay, everybody can see that. So we track the changes. So you'll see, I think you can see in the side here, there's some comments, but basically we fixed some grammatical things. As Councilor Lisi said, we changed it to hiring schedules throughout the document. So you'll see that all the way through. And then in subsection B, we added some language and restrictions about where individuals could be placed. So the first subsection indicates that any new employee that's hired after the adoption date of the ordinance would be placed somewhere between the minimum and mid range on the salary schedule, the hiring schedule. The reason we call it a hiring schedule, by the way, is essentially it's meant to create a range where you hire people into the range. Then after that, they may move within that range based on performance typically, or a standard COLA. But the range itself would remain static for hiring purposes, basically. Under subsection 2, any of the employees that were already employed at the time of adoption of the ordinance would be placed between minimum and maximum. So basically anywhere on the hiring range. But they could not be placed any higher than the maximum salary. So that would be the cap for placement. If somebody's currently making less than the minimum salary, we came up with a formula to try and break up the cost of implementing the salary or hiring schedule. So in the first year, they would get 70% of the difference between their current rate and the minimum amount. And then the next year, they would get the remaining amount, the remaining 30%. So we gave an example here just to make that a little more clear because it is a little confusing. So if you were making 40,000 and the minimum salary is 45,000, if you look at the difference, that's 70% of $5,000 is 3,500. So in the first year, they make 43,500. And in the second year, you place them at the minimum amount, which is 45,000. So the extra 30%. That obviously is just for your consideration. I mean, the council needs to come up with whatever you think is reasonable as far as the cost of implementing the hiring schedule, if you decide to do so. But we wanted to give you a concept, so you had a starting place, basically.
And Russell, I might add something here. So the total amount to bring everyone who's presently below the new floor of the new ranges, it was the yellow column in the Excel spreadsheet for the 17 July 27 or salary schedule. The total amount to bring everyone who's presently below the floor is $230,000. So to bring everybody 70% of the way in the first year would reduce that cost to the city to $161,000 in the first year. And then the difference in the cost would come in the second year. This doesn't necessarily have to be codified in ordinance form either. It could just be a resolution of sorts that we decide as a council. But it was good to have it in there as an example and a just starting point in terms of the 70% that could be adjusted up or down depending on where the conversation goes tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so the next provision is kind of establishing what happens when you get to the maximum amount. So at that point, employees would no longer be able to move in the hiring schedule. The only thing they could possibly get would be a cost of living increase, educational incentives, the residential incentives, if you have any, and longevity. So those items would be added to the max amount, but they wouldn't be able to get some other, increase due to the hiring schedule itself. Under elected officials, and again, this is just a starting place or a concept to consider. It's something the council could certainly adjust, but upon the adoption of the ordinance, and we wanted to make it clear, not retroactive, that the salaries for elected officials, unlike the rest of the employees, would only be adjusted every 5 years, and it would commence on July 1, 2026. And what we would do is base it on the consumer price index in the Northeast region. So basically, let's say the consumer price index went up by 1% a year during a 5-year period. At the end of a 5-year period, they would get a 5% increase. Again, that's just a concept, but we were trying to come up with something for elected officials that would be more of a standard type increase instead of having, it's very difficult to come up with what you think elected officials should really receive on a year-to-year basis. So we were trying to make something just tied to some other outside benchmark that would make it more, well, it would make it easier to actually increase the rates without having a debate every year.
And that speaks exactly to the points that Councilor Murphy raised in having a predictable and non-political way to increase elected officials' salaries.
So under longevity, again, like I said, we just changed the wording to hiring schedules. All this other language that's still in black, none of that was changed from the last version you've seen. I changed in some places where it says his, I just changed it to an employees to make it gender neutral. And I think that is it. So
the ordinance itself.
Yeah, the schedule itself is just, again, changing the title. I changed it so it would be effective upon adoption of the revised ordinance. And those are all the changes.
Rebecca, can Jeffrey send those to us by emails so we can easily print them?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to stop sharing the screen, or do you want to keep
Well,
it up?
let's pause here and see if there's questions about the ordinance and controls that came up. Yeah, let's stop sharing the screen until we actually have questions that are targeted.
Okay.
Are there questions from committee members or council members present? And Linda, is that your hand for this discussion?
It can be.
Go ahead. Why don't you start?
Well, I have an opinion that I want to express relative to elected officials, which I've expressed in earlier meetings. One is that I do not think it should be on the table at all right now for any elected official to get any increase while we're sitting here in the middle of the COVID crisis, and we have so many residents who are paying the freight for the city budget, which is already in distress, who themselves are in great distress. Secondarily, I will never support an automatic built-in increase for elected officials. The benchmark that I would suggest for raises for elected officials would be the health of the financial well-being of the city. And right now, I would say based on that benchmark, we should not be getting any increases as elected officials. So I appreciate the sentiment to avoid debate. I see it as a point of accountability as we are serving the public. The public is not there to serve us. And I feel by putting in fixed automatic increases for elected officials, we are turning the tables in a way that we should not. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So just, I want to get into the employee situation and not elected officials, which I think is the most important thing. Now I'm just, and Russell, just correct me if I'm wrong here, but I didn't see any adjustments on the classification, and now we're calling it hiring plan or whatever. But so are there any recommendations you're making in terms of where those numbers, minimum, mid, and max, should be on that chart?
So my understanding, and Hector could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what's happened is we got the study back in 2015, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And I think their intent was to add the standard raises of 2% each year up to today, so 2021. Do those numbers already reflect that, Hector? Or is it going?
We'd have to go into the spreadsheet. So they are not redlined in this document. We'd have to go into the spreadsheet to look at those new numbers.
I just think, if I could, I just think it would be a lot easier to review, to consider, and eventually to support if we were able to take, I'm just looking at, I know this is an old one, but I guess the pays haven't changed. The Schedule A compensation effective July 1, 2016. What I'd like to do is get a document that says this is what the recommendation would be if we were to amend that, and based on this. And I know we got to, and I know Hector did a lot of work on it, but if we could put it into this form, mm-hmm. It would be a whole lot easier. I mean, I'm going through, I got, and I'm not a computer person, but I got, spread out spreadsheets all over the place, and I'm trying, which one is for this and where does that go? So if we could put a recommendation on Schedule A with the recommendation based on, if it's based on the 2% a year, and this is what it's based, this is what we're coming to, then we see that document, then I would be much more in a position to say, and believe me, I believe many of these people should be getting a raise. I mean, I know I looked at some of the library things and I know they should be getting a raise. And I'd like to get as much of them as possible within a reasonable time frame, with an idea that it's going to go up again potentially the next year, so that we're basically, I'm not sure I agree with trying to do it all at one time, but I think that's something that I know, trying to follow this, it would make it a whole lot easier for me to look at Schedule A. This is the recommended change for Schedule A, and this is what it would look like. And then I can compare it to what it is. Then I can compare it to what the costs are, and then I can make a more informed decision. And I think that would also make it less personal, but also much easier to follow and to make a decision. So if we could do that, I would, you know, until I can see that, I can't vote for anything because I'm just still out there. Thank you.
Great. And I think, you know, since we have Russell here and he worked on the, like the budgetary control language, I think that would be the focus of this discussion. And I appreciate the feedback, Councilor Murphy. And I think that by the next time we take it up, we could have something that looks relatively concise and easy to look at for review. But I think
if we took Russell's document and all those recommendations, and then we put a schedule with that, I think the language then with the actual numbers, you can start, again, it makes the whole picture much clearer than this part of the picture I'm looking at, and then I got to see that picture over here, and I have a hard time with that.
I see. Are there other comments from committee members then? Russell, you wanted to make another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that would be very easy to do because the ordinance has the 2015 numbers in it. So I think somebody, I don't know, Hector, who would do it, but somebody at the city side could put in the new
numbers. Crystal.
Okay.
Yeah, because she has the master document that we were using to create the red line version here.
Yeah, so we could do that pretty easily for the next meeting.
And again, for me, Schedule A is the one I really want to look at right now.
Mm-hmm. And then just for getting prepared for the next meeting, Councilor Murphy, do you want to see the salaries redlined as well, like where they were and then where they would be, or do you want just the new numbers?
What I like is just the new numbers on Schedule A, and not no names. But just the new schedule, and then. If we accept that schedule, I'm going to assume, and then we accept the language that Russell's got, I'm assuming that's going to make many of these people that should have a salary adjustment have a salary adjustment. And if we agree with it and then timeline and all that kind of stuff, obviously that has to be played, and the transfers and all the other things. So, but that's what I would be looking at.
Okay. Councilor McGivern.
Just a couple of quick comments. To Attorney Dupre, I like, you know, Russell, what you've done. It makes a lot of sense out of what we've been trying to make a lot of sense out of for several years now. And I think it gives us some good tools to be fair and at the same time be accountable in terms of the budget. I think the bulk of this discussion and debate is about department heads. And I would just point out that there are 3 elected officials who are department heads who it's their full-time jobs. And of course, that's the city treasurer, the city clerk, and the mayor. And they are working during COVID. And I think we need to look at their salaries just as we look at any department's salaries, because many of these have not been adjusted. Do elected officials have to have a automatic increase? I don't think so. I think department heads, the formula makes sense to look at some type of automatic COLA increase that can be implemented on an annual basis. But I think elected officials, we typically, when we raise salaries, we do so at the end of a term, effective for after the election for the beginning of a term. And voters seem to appreciate that more often. I think we're in the golden year to do that, and that the election is in November. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to look at salaries that have not been adjusted, in some cases going on 8 to 10 years.
Are there any department heads that wish to comment? Linda, is that your hand anew?
Yes, please. Okay.
Councilor Vacon, and then department heads, if anyone would like to comment on the language that we're looking at this evening, you're welcome to. Councilor Vacon.
Thank you. I know we're focusing on bringing people up to the minimums at this time, but when we get the updated comparison spreadsheets, will we also get the ranges? Because one of the major concerns was how broad some of the ranges were. And once we get past the hiring side, most of the people are existing employees. And once they're set on that scale, then what I'm hearing is they can move anywhere in the scale. In the private sector, usually you move in an orderly fashion on a scale. In this case, the range becomes very important because what I'm hearing and what I'm reading indicates that once they're at the mid-range, they can move anywhere on the range at any time. And so it makes those salary ranges important for us to consider also. Thank you.
Councilor Murphy, is that your hand anew?
Yeah, well, I knew. So again, and I don't disagree with what Councilor McGivern said, and I do agree with if we do anything, it needs to be for January of 2022, and that my major disagreement in terms of numbers, in terms of Russell's thing for elected officials would be every 5 years. I would say since we're on a 2 and 4 year situation, that it would be a 4-year thing. And I'm not sure, and subject to some kind of approval that would be necessary. But I think right now, I think the first priority for me is the lower paid, and many of these are lower paid people who have been at that same rate for a long time. That let's see what we can do for them, potentially come, I assume, July 1st, and then put a plan together that makes sense. And my idea is I'm looking at potentially a July 1st and then another July 1st to get them really comfortable, but do it within our affordability. And then after that, in a separate entity, to look at elected officials or any of the other commissions that we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's broken up into the different schedules, and so there is the ability to look at them separately, and Councilor McGivern's order is separate from the other salary schedules as well. So there's multiple ways of carving out Schedule B with, about the elected officials and having a separate discussion.
And I would just say one other thing, that I just think in terms of elected officials, and the reason I said we need to try to do it non-political, and I don't disagree with Councilor Bacon that we're not a tough time to be doing it because of the city's financial, just everybody's financial situation, to be honest. But I mean, you just look at what is being proposed. Chicopee just came out. I mean, if you're the average taxpayer and you're seeing, and I think in Chicopee was a $37,000 mayoral raise. I mean, those are kind of things that definitely turn taxpayers off, and they should. I mean, we need to do something that makes sense to keep. And I'm not saying I want to give anybody a phenomenal raise. I do think elected officials do serve, and all of our history in this country has been aimed at people serving in higher offices as an avocation rather than a vocation. Not that they shouldn't make enough money to be able to live, but they certainly shouldn't make enough that they are living well beyond the means of the people that they serve. So. And again, I just think that Russell's formula there makes some sense to me, because it tries to take politics out of it. And it also tries not to go 10 years down the way without anybody getting a raise, because it's going to tick off the taxpayers. And I don't blame the taxpayers for being ticked off. I mean, it's Chicopee, I know Agawam, the pays that are being suggested, in my opinion, is a slap in some people's face, the average person's face. So, I mean, I just want to avoid that if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Hector.
Thank you. I have a question for perhaps both Councilor Lisi and Councilor Murphy. So after listening to Councilor Murphy's request for consolidation of the data, and in partnership with Councilor Lisi, I think what you're requesting we already have available. So if we have to just manipulate the spreadsheets or put it into a particular form or a draft for it to be easier to read, that I think we can do that. I just want to make sure that you are aware of the spreadsheet that does exist, because after listening to you, the information that I heard is that you know, I think we have that already. And so if it's just a matter of transferring that data onto a Word document, I think that's okay. But also, Councilor Murphy, if or Councilor Murphy or any councilors that may find this to be helpful, if and I don't know the rules or the regulations that surround additional meetings, but if there's just a meeting that perhaps we need to connect with the auditor on, or something that's a little bit more internal, I think we can do that, just to not to elaborate on the larger discussion, but to review the information prior to having it accessible at a council meeting. Only because it's just every meeting, the additional information and further review, I think, becomes a little bit more burdensome. So if there is a mechanism in place to kind of touch base with folks that may need some assistance with reviewing the documents or anything of that sort, I am certainly open to that. I'm not familiar with the meeting rules and such.
For me, Hector, and thank you, and I appreciate your work, and I appreciate what you've done. I'm just having a hard time putting it back into that chart. Now I know what we got on our agenda had the schedule in a nice simple format, and it went all the way from grade 1 to grade 18, and the minimum, mid, and then the max. So all I'm asking, if we could get that with the recommended change, and get that same kind of document, then I can take that document and compare it to what I have and know, without having to go back and forth, I just look right down. Here's this one, here's this one, here's the comparison. And it would just be one sheet against the other sheet, and I'd be able to go up and down it and know, okay, that one got a $20,000 raise. I'm okay with that, or whatever the case might be. So, I mean, it would just, to me, it makes it so that I can read it and have the two documents right next to each other and be able to compare.
That is very easy to do. I think perhaps maybe my question was a little bit larger in terms of from an efficiency standpoint. I think each meeting where we have a document that has been recently updated from the previous version based off of a particular council's request, each meeting following, there just happens to be a furthered request. And so I don't know if maybe the counselors can get together and review the documents together and decide what is needed. That way, the next time we reconvene, the questions that weren't asked tonight are not then asked at the next meeting, which will then, further prolong us wrapping this subject up. I don't know what that looks like, so I would leave that to the counselors to decide or speak on.
I would just tell you, if I can, Madam Chair, for me, if you can provide that comparison document so that I have what is current and what we're recommending side by side, that makes it a lot clearer for me, and would make it much easier for me to say, okay, I'm going along with this. These people have waited long enough. I may say I'm going to say 8% instead of 10%, whatever the case might be, but I would have that right in front of me. And right now, I know what they're making, and I have to go try to extract it with the recommendations, and they're not compared. They're not side by side.
Well, I'll just say then, so, I asked earlier if it would help to have the salary schedule or Schedule A red line, so you could see the present and the new. I think that's going to be easier than having two documents side by side. So we'll just redline and make those changes tracked in the ordinance Word document that we're presently looking at. I feel like that's the only piece of missing information, and we could do the same thing for the Schedule B, so that just for discussion purposes, you can see where things are at presently and where things are going. I would discourage any sort of like arbitrary like 8% for this grade or 10% for that grade. I would discourage that, because that's not, again, it's just going to be arbitrary, and perhaps Russell could speak to some of the methodology there a bit better. But I think, the best way that we can create affordability is by doing the tiered implementation, where we just pick, if it costs, again, $230,000 to bring everybody under the floor up to the floor of the new schedule. How much of that can we afford in 1 year? Is it $150,000? Is it $180,000? Is it $100,000? And then set the percentage of how much we're moving people up into these new salary ranges, evenly or, fairly across the board, as opposed to grade or category by category.
I'm not suggesting that we do it by each grade. I'm saying if it's 10%, and my personal opinion is it should be 8%, it would be 8% across the board. I'm not saying we're gonna do grade 1, we're gonna do 15%, and grade 18 we're gonna do 1%. No, I'm not saying that. I know I paid very close attention to Hector over these several times we've had our meetings. I know his recommendation, and I respect it. But again, I think that's what I'm going to see comparing, and that would give me what that is and what that percentage is. And, I certainly feel free, and I feel an obligation to make sure that it's something that we can afford. But I also want to try to make sure that we get people to that level as soon as possible, if not beyond that.
Right. And then, Russell, can you just confirm we did sort of confirm with HRS that 2% COLAs have been sort of the what the industry has given over the past 10 years. I don't know if you have like more concrete way of articulating that.
So I don't know if I would say the last 10 years, but the last 5 years, I would say, since they did their study. We represent, I don't know, 85 public employers or something. And the vast majority settled at 2% a year for all of those years. It's probably the most consistent time period I've seen in my career where the raises everybody was settling at 2%. I had very few that were below it, and I had very few that were above it, which is different than really the rest of my career was really all over the place. There were some places settling at 1, there were some places settling at 3, some places were at 0. But the last few years has been pretty stable as far as the economy. So 2% is definitely the most common settlement I saw throughout those years. So I think that's a reasonable assumption is 2% was the average over the last 5 years. I think they took 65% when they looked at the area municipalities at the time in 2015. My understanding is they put those numbers you see in the ordinance were the 65th percentile.
And can you explain that? Because we had some trouble articulating what that meant exactly in previous discussions. And if you, again, have a succinct way of describing what it means to be in the 65th percentile with these ranges, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think what she did is, my understanding from that meeting we had with her, I think if you had, let's say the midpoint was $50,000 and the maximum's, 70 and the minimum was 30. She took that range and she said, okay, well, 50 is the middle. We're going to bump you up to 65th percentile, which might be more like, in what I just said, let's say 55,000. So you're not directly in the middle, you're a little above. And I think the point of that is that you have a little bit easier time hiring people.
And it was in relation to all the other salaries, right? So all the other salaries created the full range within the study. All the other municipality salaries created the full range.
Yes.
And so for us to be at the 65th percentile, it means that we're not at the median of the full set of salaries that were out there. We were at the 65th percentile. So there were still, 35% of the communities that were surveyed would still be making more money than our employees in the full range.
That's my understanding how she did it. Yes. Okay. There's one other thing I thought of, that if you wanted to add an additional kind of restriction. You could say that employees that are already within the minimum and maximum range for that first year, that their placement wouldn't be more than X% if you wanted to put a cap on it. So you could say 2% or something. I'm not sure that budget number that you were looking at, if that includes some cap for people that are already within the minimum and maximum range. And I have no idea how many employees that would even be. But that would be another way to kind of control the budget potentially, at least in the first year. After that, it's obviously year-to-year budget decisions. But.
Okay, let's come back to that if we need to. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. Just two things real quick. One on item 4, when I filed that in 2018, I made it clear that I was asked to put the all elected officials and to make sure that they were part of the discussion, and therefore the city council salaries are there. I am not advocating that we raise the city council salary, not at this time. It certainly is up for discussion, but I am advocating for the 3 elected officials who work full-time in City Hall. 2, I understand where Councilor Murphy's coming from. I think we all have to feel comfortable with affordability, but just 2 reminders, and I think we've come a long way with what Attorney Dupre has put in front of us this evening. Is one of the roadblocks that we've hit over the years is on salary ranges when we have a veteran department head or assistant department head who is maxed out. In cost of living, we could not even give them because they were at the top of the salary range, and we had no mechanism to address that. That's why our salary range, and that's why we all agreed to the classification study itself, was to find a new salary range that is fair. Implementing and putting in ordinance the salary range is not the final step. The appropriation by the mayor and the budget process or the budget process is the final step for these increases. And I don't see some of them, because they're so out of whack, happening, in one appropriation. But certainly, until we change the language, we can't even address the salaries that make no sense. Earlier this evening, I led the charge as much as anyone here in criticism of the management of grants by by departments who get grants. I am now want to be one of the voices that advocate that, with management, with responsibility comes the necessity of a fair salary. And that is all I'm looking for, is to give our employees a fair salary. And you can't say that when someone goes 8 to 9 years without a cost of living increase, that they're getting a fair salary. We need to change the language so that we have options down the road and take care of the people who are working during COVID for the City of Holyoke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that several department heads in the sort of qualitative discussions that we're having noted how, if the expenses are going up but our salaries are staying the same, and the insurance prices are going up within the city and the salaries are staying the same, they're actually getting paid less over time. Their salaries are being rolled back even further because they're not keeping pace with the expenses that even the city's health insurance are imposing on them. All right, so I think the task that I see for the next conversation is to update the Schedule A with the numbers that are in the spreadsheet to define the min, mid, and max. We want to perhaps move the indexed increase for electeds to an even numbered year, such as 4 or 6 years. We want to have different options for how we increase the salaries of those that are presently outside or below the new minimums. And I think there's a number of ways that we could do that. And I think that we could outline them all for the body at the next meeting. Is there anything else that people need for the discussion?
We're going to get copies of Russell's thing, right?
Jeffrey's going to email them out to you. They are in your drive presently, though, just so that that's clear.
I don't have my car with me. Oh, gotta have a little humor in the world, people. Come on now. That was one of my better ones.
Thanks for that.
That's the old timer talking.
Councilor Lisi?
Go ahead, Hector.
I'm not sure if this was part of, I'm not sure if we're closing or not, but I do know that we did invite department heads tonight, and considering the time that it took to get to this discussion, I just wasn't sure if there was any department heads that are still present that felt the need to perhaps just relay any words of any sort, as I'm sure that's perhaps one of the reasons why you guys are in attendance tonight. And I just want to make sure that folks didn't feel their presence tonight was not considered. So.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, any comments are welcome from department heads. If you want to weigh in on any of the changes that were discussed this evening, you can raise your hand in case you're not, oh, sorry about that. In case you're looking to navigate on Zoom, you could either go to the bottom of your screen for the reactions button, click on that and find the raise hand, or you go onto the participants button, and under participants, you would find your blue buttons at the bottom of the area there to raise your hand. I see Councilor Hernandez, you have your hand up.
Yes, Councilor Lisi, and thank you so much. I just wanted to, to state that I thank everybody and all the department heads that are here in this very important meeting. My input is minimal because I'm learning, all of this with the budget. I know that it's going to take more than, several meetings in order for everyone to work and arrive at where we want to be on compensating our hard workers of the city. And I just want all the department heads to know that I will work diligently with all of my colleagues here to make sure that we arrive at where we need to be, and then maintain this on an annual basis, and be able to compensate everyone. And although tonight maybe it's not the results that some were expecting, just know that we will diligently work towards reaching that goal, and that all of your hard work doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other department heads who would like to speak? You are welcome to weigh in on the comments and changes that were discussed this evening. I am not seeing anyone. All right, so I think that
I would offer a motion to table to the next meeting.
Second.
Motion is to table the order and take it up at our next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Yep. We should have a very sort of concise looking document to review at the next meeting. And I thank everyone for the work that they did to sort of build up to that point where we now get to have something simple to look at. So thanks for all your work along the way. Okay.
You're moving along, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take up the next item in our agenda then, which is
to take up item 5.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to take up item number 5. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. This is filed by myself to review section 86-97 of the city's parking ordinance, and that it be struck, which allows for all-night parking, and then it has some downtown area restriction between the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. So we brought this up at the last meeting, and it seemed like we wanted to get some input from Mike McManus, because there was a sense that we might actually need to have parking downtown.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Sorry, Russell. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.
No help with the parking ordinance. So.
We're good. We're good. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so Mike, this ordinance, and I don't know if you have it in front of you, I'm sorry?
I've read it.
You read it. Okay, so it's saying that no one should be allowed to park downtown between the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. And at some point in time, it seemed like it was an outdated ordinance and that it should be struck from the parking ordinances altogether. But when we were discussing it last week, there's some discussion saying that it might be necessary, it might be required for street sweeping purposes or cleaning purposes. And folks wanted to check in with you to get your take on what this ordinance is doing for us as a city.
So I think currently it doesn't do too much for us in the city. I agree. It's probably a throwback to when there was more aggressive street sweeping. Now we rely more on the litter vac to clean up litter and debris in the downtown areas. And we don't need the no parking ordinance in downtown. If we do get back to a place where we are sweeping, we would probably not sweep every day. We might have certain days dedicated for sweeping, in which case we could post certain sides of the street, no parking on this side on Mondays or Thursdays, something along those lines. I think this would be an ordinance that could be removed without any negative ramifications at this point in time.
Okay, under discussion, Councilor McGivern has his hand.
Thank you. Mike, what about snow removal? The downtown area was always trying to get both sides of the street done. So when business opened up the day after the storm, it was ready.
I mean, we have the on an even side parking bans. I see your point with snow removal. It doesn't really apply in the middle of July. No. So would it be worth having an ordinance that prevents parking in the downtown area where there could be a need for overnight parking? That people do live downtown. People have cars. I know we've come into issues where there are residents who park downtown. The ordinance wasn't enforced, and they weren't able to move their cars in the morning, and they would be in an expired parking spot, and they would get a parking ticket. So it's a fair question about snow removal, and maybe that could be a special case where we handle it with different language than this broad ordinance.
Thank you.
Councilor Vacon.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mike, I was just wondering, and I think maybe this came up at our last meeting, if we move to rescind the overnight parking from the downtown residential area, but not all of downtown. And that would seem to accomplish the goal of providing access for the residents, but also not having it encroach over onto the business side, which there should really be no reason for people to be parking there all night. Would that be a reasonable accommodation from your perspective?
So while I don't know the exact usage of every building in the downtown area, I think the only block that might not have any residential component to it could be High Street in between Suffolk and Dwight. I know other sections of High Street towards Hamden have residential. So I do think there is a residential component to the downtown, the business core downtown area around City Hall.
Is what I hear you saying is pretty much all of it.
Right. And people do have more cars today than they did 20 years ago.
Thank you.
We did. There is ordinance language where people could park in the parking deck overnight. but that people have been parking on street in the downtown area.
Are you all set, Linda?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, Counselor McGivern.
People have been sleeping in the parking deck overnight, but that's not the order here before us tonight. I think Councilor Bacon brings up a good point, because if I remember correctly, Mike, when we say the downtown area for this type of an ordinance, we're talking about the meter zone, which is just about all commercial with residential. But things have changed, like Holyoke Catholic becoming the apartments and other areas where the meters extend away from the actual commercial district. But I think if you're comfortable with being able to do snow removal and have it ready for the next day, then, you know, parking makes sense for where people do live.
Just out of curiosity, Mike, as you are, you know, coming in and out of, you know, the downtown for work, and is this actually, I mean, are people parking on the street presently between 2 and 7 a.m.? And is this ordinance that's before us, that's being asked to be struck, is it actually enforced today, or is it not even being enforced and we're not going to miss it if we strike it?
So not every single parking space is occupied during those times, but some parking spaces are occupied, and it is not being enforced, to my knowledge. I've never seen anybody being towed, and I do not believe it's being enforced.
Okay, Councilor Murphy.
And Mike, do we do a downtown cleaning on? Is it every day, every morning, once a week? It's
not every day. We do it as we have manpower.
I didn't get that last time.
We do it as we have manpower. So if we have sufficient people to staff the litter vac, we will put somebody in the litter vac.
Okay.
But on certain days, we don't always have enough people to do that.
Does Suez do any of that?
Suez?
Yeah.
Suez does street sweeping, and they focus on, they don't focus on the downtown areas. Okay. They're more like Northampton Street, but also once or twice around the city a year in order to meet the NIPD's permit for our MS4, the storm drainage system permit.
Okay. Man, again, with the idea, I know there were a lot more cars than there were when I was a kid, and you know, if we can allow people to park there and it's not going to cause us any problem with cleaning or snow removal, then I'm all for that. But we do have to make sure that once it's business hours that those cars are moved. So, and or pay the parking meter. But you know, I think the idea of trying to make it more convenient for residents is a good idea, as long as we're not making the business community suffer. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't heard any complaints from the business community that people are parking overnight. When it does get to snow removal, when we need to bring out the heavy equipment to remove snow from the downtown area, that usually has been an overnight operation, and we'll post no parking in those areas, and we would enforce the no parking at that point in time because we're trying to remove snow.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mike.
It seems that you know, a motion is in order, and so I would entertain a motion that we adopt the striking of the ordinance section 86-97.
So moved.
The motion has been made and seconded. I think Juan Anderson Burgos seconded it when you said so moved, Councilor Murphy. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. 5-0 vote.
Is that all you need me for, Rebecca?
I think so, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, and then finally, back to regular order.
That'd be item 7.
And item 7 includes item 7A and B in that discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved. So item number 7 is ordered that in an effort to enhance food access and security for our residents during these uncertain times, we expedite a backyard chicken ordinance. And item 7A related is the revised Code of Ordinances, and then Appendix A of the revised Code of Ordinances is 7B, which is the zoning aspect of it. So I know, Councilor Murphy, you were talking about your car, not having your car with you, but have you been able to check out these updated documents? I believe that Jeffrey did send them directly via email.
I copied what Jeffrey sent today or yesterday, whenever he sent the whole committee stuff, I was able to print some of that out. So.
Okay.
Can we put those up on the shared screen?
Sure, that sounds fine. Where is my drive? Here we go. Sorry for the delay. Okay. Ordinance 126.
And can you walk us through the language to show that it matches up to your report from last time, please?
Yes. So let me pull them both up. Seven A and 7B. Okay, so let's try to screen share this. And 7B is what we want to look at. Okay. So this is a draft, and this is related to the zoning. So this is 7B first. Oh my gosh, my battery's dying. Do you guys see that too? Let me plug in. Was that on the screen share? Okay. So Appendix A, entitled Zoning of the Revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Holyoke, Massachusetts, 1997, as amended, is hereby further amended by the following. Adding Section 2 definitions. Hen is female chicken, coop or hen house, an enclosed structure for hens, run an enclosed outdoor space for hens. Under Section 4.4.2, permitted uses. Where's my scrolling button? Oh, sorry. So this is the part that has not changed. Animals accessory to dwellings, including cattle, horses, sheep, hogs, goats, game birds, chickens, or other similar livestock, shall be permitted. Accessory to a dwelling, such animals and their waste shall be contained at least 100 feet from any abutting lot of residentially used lot, and at least 100 feet from any year-round surface water body.
And that's as of right, correct?
In RA only.
Yes, as of right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then we're adding that coops and hen house, coop / hen house and run for keeping up to 6 hens is permitted in R1, R1A, R2, DR, and up to 6 unit dwellings.
Can I ask a question on the up to 6 unit dwellings then?
Yep.
So, I mean, I just looked at, a number of buildings that would be in Ward 2. And, I'll use the Battleship buildings. There's 2 Battleship buildings that have 10 apartments. They probably have some of the biggest yards in South Holyoke. And yet they would not be eligible because they have 10 dwellings. Is there a rationale for the 6 limit?
Yeah, I mean, the 6 became the sort of cutoff point because of the concerns that you were raising about the equity of the first come, first serve in any one particular building, because you could only have one coop on a property. So that was the way that we settled the equity issue within apartment buildings.
Okay, yeah, I'm not really sure that's settling, because again, if someone's in a 10-unit building, I mean, it's 1 out of 10, and this is just 1 out of 6.
Right.
I mean, again, I'll go. I just needed to get a little understanding. I didn't remember us discussing it that way, but I appreciate your memory better than mine.
I mean, I'm happy to say higher amounts. It's just that the greater the number of residents in a building, the more inequity you're sort of imposing within that structure, because only one person can have the coop.
Okay.
So 6 seemed to be a manageable point where, you know, if neighbors wanted to contribute and share, they probably had enough of a familiarity with one another to be able to, you know, work collectively. And anything more, we thought it would become competitive and unfriendly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is B, and I need to find my functions now that we're in this other screen share format. Would you just speak up as a counselor if you're looking to comment on this? So I'm not hearing anyone, and we can go to item 7A then. Okay, can everybody see still?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the 10th amendment to Chapter 14 of the revised Code of Ordinances of the City of Holyoke, Massachusetts, 1997. So this is further amending this. So in Section 1 of Chapter 14, entitled Animals of the revised Code of Ordinances, we're going to delete in its entirety the previous section, 14-12, which said you couldn't keep animals so this is the former section that we are removing and then adding in its place a whole new section 14-2, wild animals, livestock animals. So let's see. Bring this up just a little bit more. Okay, so in general, no person shall keep or permit to be kept on his premises any wild domestic, hybrid, or vicious animal as a pet for display or exhibition purposes. This section shall not be construed to apply to zoological parks, animal exhibitions, circuses, or approved TNR programs as defined by this chapter. This section shall not apply to animals which are deemed permissible to keep by the laws of regulations of Massachusetts. No person shall provide food or sustenance to wild animals in any manner that should cause a public health or safety risk, cause a nuisance, or as defined by this chapter. An animal control officer may remove any animals kept in violation of this section and either release such animals into its natural habitat or place it in a suitable animal shelter. Any costs associated with the removal of an animal will be kept in violation, will be payable by the owner. No person shall keep any livestock animals on their property except as otherwise allowed by the Holyoke zoning ordinances or state law. And then that's where we just reviewed the zoning in the table of uses. If a violation of the Holyoke zoning ordinance is determined by the building commissioner in accordance with the section 9.0 of administration, enforcement, and procedures of the Holyoke zoning ordinances, an animal control officer may seize or impound the animals. So then here's where we define hens. And this is different than in I'm just going to point it out here. So chickens are defined here, and hens are defined here. So the chickens are by right in the RA only zone, because you don't have to define whether it's a hen or a rooster or anything else. But in the ordinance itself, we're defining hens. And let me just pull this up so we can read it more easily. Okay, so definitions. The following words, terms, and phrases when used in this section shall have the following meaning ascribed to them in this section. Abutters. So the abutters shall mean owners of abutting land or property within 100 feet of the applicant property line. Hen shall mean female chicken.
If I can stop you right there, because that should be 300 feet.
It should be. Crystal, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I sent the updated draft with the 300 feet to Jeff at the last meeting after council. It should have come along with the updated zoning one that you all looked at tonight. So it should have the 300 feet now.
So as far as we understand, this is what we have from Jeff from the last meeting. And so do you want me to make these changes as we go along?
Yeah, that's fine.
That we amend that to 300 on that.
Yep. So I'm amending it as we go live here.
Yep.
And then I'll turn these revisions into Crystal. Hen shall mean a female chicken. Hen house shall mean an enclosed structure for hens. Run shall mean an enclosed outdoor space for hens. And then here's the special permit process.
Can I ask a question as we go into the run?
Yep.
So I just want to make sure I understand a definition of an enclosed outdoor space. I mean, I've gotten, is outdoor just means that there's not a roof? What does that mean?
So there has to be a house, a coop,
Yep.
in which the hens can live and roost and lay their eggs, but then
Yep.
they need space to actually move about during the day. And so when we define hen house and run later on, we talk about the hen house as being an enclosed structure that gives each hen at least 3 square feet of space inside the
Yep.
structure. And then the run has to include 10 square feet of space within the space outdoors surrounding it. So the entire thing is sort of compact and enclosed. The hen house can be either surrounded by the run or attached on 2 points to the beginning and end of the run. But there needs to be an outdoor space for them to live and eat and roam and get exercise, in addition to the house that provides shelter.
Isn't the hen house outdoors?
The hen house is creating an indoor shelter. So it creates the indoor shelter.
Okay.
And I see Councilor Hernandez's hand up. So I just want to make sure before we move on to Councilor Hernandez that it's differentiated enough for you, Councilor Murphy, here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand it, and if I have to describe it to somebody. So. Okay.
So the coop is like the little doghouse, if you will, right? The coop is the doghouse that has a roof and 4 sides, and it's made of wood, and it has a place for them to sleep and lay eggs, and that's a box. The run is the space.
Is that box closed? I mean,
the hen house is closed.
So in the hen house, they're enclosed.
Inside the hen house, yes.
And it's totally covered, all 4 sides, top, bottom, and all the 4 sides?
Yep, and there's just a little door that would allow them to get in and out, like a doghouse.
Okay. But can they go in and out on their own? Or
Yep.
only so they can?
They can, but that's why you have the run around the coop. So they can't just go wherever they want. They don't fly, and so you have a fence creating a run around the doghouse that limits the space where they can go. That's why you have the run. but they do need exercise and they need to be able to find their bugs and food and stuff like that. So they need to get outside.
Okay.
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to talk about the run. And I heard when Councilor Murphy said if it had a roof or not. And during our discussions, I remember some of the people that joined us, since they don't fly, the run doesn't necessarily have to be enclosed, but high enough that they don't come out, right? Am I right?
The run is completely enclosed,
but not.
it doesn't
Does
have
it
to have
to
a
be
roof.
It doesn't have to have a roof. The house, however, that has a roof, or the little coop, little house for the chicken, and it's connected to the run, but the run doesn't necessarily have to be enclosed on the top because they don't fly, and as long as they can't jump out, they just should have enough space to walk, do exercise, and feed on the bugs and stuff like that.
If I could.
Please, go ahead.
So I was under the impression that we were going to put something on top. If it wasn't, I think it was 5 feet or 6 feet. One of them, I think it's at 5 feet. You need to have a top on the run so that other animals couldn't come in, or predators couldn't come in and attack the hens. And I could be wrong. Again, I'm learning as I go here. So, but I thought there was a part of here in the Board of Health regulations that there was, if it was, I think it was 5 feet, you had to have some kind of cover on top, right? Not, I guess, not to prevent rain, but to prevent predators.
I think that the through the conversation, we decided that a lot of the folks that have hens in the city, such as like Christine Burns, and she was also part of some sort of like I forget the name of the society, but it was for the safekeeping, healthy keeping of hens. But she noted that it's not necessary to have a cover, and I think it was through that discussion that we eliminated it.
Okay.
Thank you.
But there is stuff. There are mentions in the Board of Health version of the regulations that says that they have to be protected from predators, and so it's not prescriptive in how they have to be protected from predators, but it is out there.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry.
May I? So we just had a comment from one of our constituents, Elizabeth Caratini Ramirez, and she says that the chickens in the nighttime, they are in their little houses, the coops, and the coops are locked to prevent from the predators on getting them. So that's when usually, you get like a fox might come around and try to get, the chickens or some other larger animal, but that they're inside of the coops, and the coops are locked in the nighttime, and then in the daytime you open them up so they can have their space to run around. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yes. Sorry, having a little bit of technical difficulties. Listen, I have a picture of a coop with a run. I just shared it with Jeff. If it's okay with you, we can put it up on the screen so that people who may have questions can actually see what one looks like.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Jeffrey, are you able to do the screen share, or do I have to stop mine first?
I believe you have to stop yours first.
Okay, there we go.
Let me just get it transferred from my phone to the appropriate location.
How's that weather out there?
I don't know. Is it still snowing?
So cold.
It
It
is.
is snowing still?
I'm in my sunroom, which is a 3-season room, but I had to buy a heater because it gets so cold in here. Like we leave our bottles of seltzer in here and it's like leaving it in a refrigerator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saving expense.
Keeps you awake through the long meetings.
I have.
Juan, since Russell was able to share, oh, here we go.
Oh, I love it.
That's
So
only
cute.
$2.99.
Oh yeah.
So
I like that one.
You're not getting chickens.
So this is, so Counselor Murphy, if you see, so like this would be the coop.
Yeah.
Sorry, my left. This is the coop, and then this is the run. And it doesn't have to be in this configuration. Like the coop could be on the floor and the run could be attached from either side and go around. But this is the difference between the coop and the run. This run actually has a cover on top because it's not very tall, it seems.
That's a safe run.
If I can, so in this case, they're running underneath the coop.
Yeah, which would be, it would probably provide a lot of shade if they needed the shade.
So outdoors just means it's out. It's not outside of that fence.
Right.
No,
it's all. It becomes.
Sorry, I just wanted to explain something. The run has a cover because the steps go up higher, letting the chicken higher. It could jump out.
Right.
In this one, and that's why it has the roof here because it has the stairs going up. Right. So if it were on the floor in this height, then, you wouldn't have that risk.
It's safer from predators too, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is this me or you? Oh, it's you, Jeff. Sorry. So, yeah, so like regardless of what shape or form the coop and the run are, they function as a single unit, but they're two different pieces of a single unit. Because one has to provide the shelter and indoor warm space for the hens, protected from, the weather and the elements and the predators. But then they do need to have access to the outdoors during the day for food and exercise. Okay, back to my screen share. Okay, so are we all set then? I think we're here and everybody's on the same page with the hen house and run then? Okay, so special permit process. No hens. So this is again differentiating between the hens and the chickens. So no hen shall be kept in the City of Holyoke without first obtaining a permit from the City Council pursuant to the City Ordinance zoning section 9-3 and Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 9. Permits must be renewed annually. The full public hearing process shall only be required upon the first permit request of the applicant. All taxes, fees, or charges owed to the city must be current at the time of initial permit request and upon each annual renewal. Public hearing notices must be published in a local newspaper, and the special permit, if approved, will need to be recorded with the Hampden County Registry of Deeds. Permit, that was another change that we made just to make sure that people understood that there were going to be multiple fees attached to this process along the way. Permit applications may only be obtained by the owner of the premises or by a tenant with documentation from the owner which indicates their approval of the tenant's request for application, as well as a copy of the lease of their premises.
And I would like to potentially eliminate the last part of that, which is as well as a copy of their lease of the premises, because I'm still under the basis that there are people who are tenants at will, and if I'm reading that correctly, they would not be allowed.
I'm unsure, but we could ask Crystal about that. I do see Councilor Hernandez's hand up on the same item though, so we'll go to Councilor Hernandez and then we'll ask Crystal for some comment.
Yes, I just wanted to, if you can explain a little bit about, I know about the special permit, but, and then you went on to say for a renewal. So the renewal is on an annual basis, and the renewal involves paying for a special permit again or paying for fees every year? Can you please clarify on that again?
Nope, it says, so it's like when we motion to renew a special permit, we always say like, pending all municipal fees and taxes are paid. So we're not going to grant the special permit unless all their debts to the city are already settled.
Oh, to the cities. Okay, thank you.
So no new fees or costs associated with renewal. Now, Crystal.
I'm sorry. So once you go through this process one time and all your fees and you're in good standing with our city, and you do this process and you have your hands, as long as you were doing the upkeep and they can come inspections and whatnot, we don't have to go through this process again, right?
Yep, one time.
As long as we're doing one time. Okay, thank you.
I do think that the board, we still have to go through the process with the Board of Health, and I think there is a fee for that.
No, we eliminated that that was the change. So it's either a Board of Health permit or a City Council special permit. And what we've opted for was the special permit process.
Right, unless there's a complaint under the permit.
Crystal, are you there to speak to tenants at will, and if they would or would not have a lease or anything like that?
I am. So tenants at will would probably need their owner of the property to come in if that's the case. They need some form of documentation that stipulates to the fact that the owner is okay with them having chickens, and without a lease, that's hard to do.
To prove their residency, or to prove that
to prove that the owner is okay with them having chickens. So a tenant at will really doesn't have any contractual obligation for any, terms or conditions of their stay in that unit. We want to make sure that a tenant at will, who potentially could be out, within a month, they generally don't have a time period that they're staying there. So if they come in, put a coop in, and then they leave a month later, what happens to that coop? The owner may or may not know that it's there. It runs into sort of a myriad of problems. It also forces people to really have formal tenancies, which they should be. Tenancy at will runs its own set of liabilities and issues. And I think, that's something to think about if we're allowing these structures and animals, et cetera. You want to make sure that these people are going to be around to take care of them. So we need to figure out what kind of documentation we want from these people if we are going to have tenants at will allowing chickens there, what we need from the owners, and we can insert that language.
Well, it seems like it does, the language in that B2 does say we need to have documentation from the owner which indicates their approval of the tenant's request for application. So I think we would be able to get that sort of approval without necessarily asking for a copy of their lease. And I'm open to hearing what other committee members have to say about that. Councilor Vacon, I see you squinting, so I'm gonna make this bigger a little bit. That helps. Does that help?
A little bit, thank you. I'm having trouble with, oh, that's better. Thank you. I'm having trouble with my glasses on or off.
I see Councilor Hernandez, and then I'll come back to you, Councilor Murphy.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. That's from previously. I'm all set with the questions. Thank you.
Do folks have opinions about striking the copy of the lease if we are getting the owner's permission regardless?
Well, to me, I just think I would imagine, well, I guess I'm being somewhat idealistic here. I would hope that a landlord would give approval only to a good tenant, whether they're a tenant in lease or a tenant at will, that they would be wise enough to, know that you've been a good tenant for the last 3 years and you want to do this, and I'm going to trust that you're going to be a good tenant for the next year or whatever the case might be. And I don't know how many. Crystal would have probably a lot better idea as to how many tenants at will there are, and I appreciate her thoughts about a tenant should have some kind of lease so that they can be covered. But I don't know. Crystal, do you know what percentage are tenants at will?
I imagine there's quite a few. I mean, we've got a lot of holdover tenants, a lot of squatters, a lot of tenants at will. It's not my concern that the owner would provide approval to tenants, that may or may not be able to maintain the animals. It's whether or not the tenants would actually get approval from these owners. It's really easy to come in with a document that says, yes, they are more than welcome to have chickens on the property. And without some sort of, notary or certified document or something, it's on the owner. So if there's a violation, that's not going to the tenant, that's going to the owner. So I'm trying to protect the owners here from now getting notices of violation. And I guess as a good owner, you should really know if you have chickens on your property. But
so could we
I want some formal way of knowing that these owners are aware that this is happening to them, so that we aren't chasing down people with, tickets and violations without their knowledge. But, it swings both ways. The owners should know that they're there. And they can put that ticket on the tenant if they so choose. So I guess it doesn't matter. So I mean, in this case, we can remove that last sentence, or that last part of the sentence after the comma, and just leave it at that. And I think it'll fish itself out.
I mean, otherwise, or could we provide some kind of notarized signature or notarized copy of the landlord's?
I think the notary makes it makes a whole nother formality that is it creates another barrier and obstacle in the process, because you have to now find a notarized public and notary. And I mean, I think what we want to do is make sure that the owner, whoever we think of the owner, is actually the owner of the property where the tenant is requesting the hen house. So we want something that says documentation from the owner which indicates the tenant's address and request for application, so that we know where they live and that the owner owns that property, as opposed to some tenant coming in with somebody else's sort of A-OK on a place where they don't live. So I think we just need to which indicates their address and approval of the tenant's request for application. That sounds like the way to go to me. Otherwise, I think the lease is there to show that you have residents somewhere.
Again, I would assume an owner hopefully would know this is a tenant or not a tenant. And again, I know there are some landlords that probably have no idea who their tenants are, unfortunately. But again, I saw the lease, and I'm of the opinion that there are a lot of tenants that will that may want to do this and probably don't have a lease, so they would be immediately left out of this. And again, if this is going to go, I want to make it as fair as I can.
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, I think that like tenants at will, like Crystal described, Attorney Barnes, that they're there and in 30 days they're gone. I don't think that they're gonna go through the trouble of, jumping or going through the process that we're putting in place now to build something that's gonna cost hundreds of dollars and then leave it, and then you do have tenants at will that are there for years. And I understand what Councilor Murphy is coming from, but I think that just having the permission from the owner and verifying that that's the owner of the property should suffice. And I wouldn't be in favor of having them go and get like another step and get it notarized, or let's make this as friendly, amicable as possible. Thank you.
So I would like to entertain a motion that we strike the after the comma, as well as copy, so striking the blue highlighted section here.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to strike the area after the comma here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Is there any appetite to make sure that we just have an address on record? Nobody seems to be going for that, and that's fine. So specifications and dimensions. Let me pull this up. I just tried to make it one little bit bigger. It might be a little bit too big that way. All right, there we go. Specifications and dimensions. Maximum of 6 hens may be kept on a parcel. A hen house and run shall be required for the keeping of hens on any parcel. Hens are not permitted to be free range. A hen house shall be sized at a minimum of 3 square feet per hen. That's the enclosed doghouse structure. A run shall be sized at a minimum of 10 square feet per hen and secured surround of the chicken wire or more durable material at a height of 5 feet tall with a roof. Oh, it does say with a roof. With a roof or 6 feet tall without a roof. Material used shall be transparent enough to see through. A hen house shall be a minimum of 8 feet from any side lot, 10 feet from any rear lot, and 50 feet from any neighboring dwelling.
And I'd like to make, I really would like to at least make it 10 feet on the side, 10 feet to the rear. My original goal was 15 feet, which would be with the same thing as Chicopee does. But I would like to, I mean, I've tried to measure out 8 feet and 10 feet. And I've gone 5 feet, which what it was originally. And I said, someone could have, and I'm just kind of looking at almost at my own property, I could have a picnic table here and I could have 8 feet away right now. And they may be the most pleasant animals in the world, but they're still 8 feet away from where I'm having not that I'll have a burger too often, but you never know. So I'd like to make that, it's 10 feet from the rear line. It would seem to me to make it 10 feet from the sideline would at least treat the neighbor to the side, each neighbor to the side as well as anybody to the back. So I'd like to make that as a motion to amend that to 10 feet from the side and keep the 10 feet from the rear and 50 feet from any neighboring dwelling.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Under discussion, I'll just note that again, because we are using this entire ordinance section as a, it's defining what can be done with accessory structures. The zoning ordinance for accessory structures in our city says that it shall be permitted in a rear yard and at a minimum of 5 feet from the side, 8 feet from the rear. So those are like, if you're putting up a garage or any sort of shed on your property, those things have to be 5 and 8 feet away from the side and the rear respectively. So this is another sort of, it's creating an anomaly, if you will.
Except the hen situation is bringing a different, you're bringing in animals that are also going to be right next to that neighbor. And it may not be a problem, but I just think, I looked at Chicopee, I looked at several others. Chicopee was 15 and 15. I've seen a few that were 10 and 10. And so that's what I'm making the motion to make it 10 and 10.
Councilor Hernandez?
Yes, oh, thank you so much. I wouldn't be voting in favor of this. I mean, I welcome your, your concerns, well, through the chair, if I may, address Councilor Murphy. But yes, the comments, yes. I would, I mean, and you already know, Councilor Murphy, in these very lower wards, very condensed areas, when I put my shed up, I mean, I followed the whatever guidelines that Rebecca Lisi just cited, and I mean, I don't think that we should make this. I'm not trying to say that it's impossible, but it could be like for a property like mine, that I wouldn't able to put my chicken coop in or at all because of trying to increase the feet that I have to be away from my neighbor. So I think that I wouldn't be in favor of it, and I would like to leave it as it is. Thank you.
So the motion was made and seconded to amend the 8 from any side lot from 8 feet to 10 feet. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
No.
opposed? No. Councillor Anderson Burgos, the chair is in question. Where are you on that one?
I said no.
Okay, thank you. So that motion fails, and we'll move on to 6. A hen house shall not interfere with any utility or other feature of the property that needs suitable access. A hen house should be located in a well-drained area that does not discharge on a public way or neighbor's property. The overall area of the coop and run shall not interfere with any utility or other feature of the property that requires suitable access for maintenance or per easement requirements. And then I need to go down from here. It shall be located in a well-drained area that does not discharge on a public way or neighbor's property. Be sufficiently enclosed and screened from the street and neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the regulating officials. Be free of odors outside of the parcel where located, either from hens or manure or other hen-related substance. And then the noise at the property boundary must conform to the city's noise ordinance. And then the hen house shall, the overall area of the coop and run shall be cleaned on a weekly basis. And then the Board of Health identifies disinfecting on a quarterly basis. D, general regulations. Hens shall not be kept within the living area of a residential structure. Regulations of 105 CMR 500 shall be followed. Open element heaters within the hen house are strictly prohibited. Roosters are strictly prohibited. And solid waste for proper offal and other solid waste disposal requirements shall follow a Chapter 74 of our refuse ordinances. The Board of Health regulations for keeping hens is hereby incorporated into this section by reference and shall have the same force and effect as if fully set forth wherein. Violations, any person who keeps, feeds, or shelters.
So what are the Board of Health regulations? Since we've been, are they what they talked about in that, and their other thing? I don't know what they are. Because I've been trying to compare the ordinance to the Board of Health thing, but yeah, I'm getting the feeling we're not doing that anymore.
Well, because the Board of Health regulations, it would be similar to what we just did with the auditor and the grant procedure. The Board of Health regulations, I think they basically have set out what they would be, and then all of the details as to what the permitting process would be has been changed. But the regulations are not something that we are going to pass by ordinance. We're just referring to them by ordinance.
Okay, so it is from that sheet where they said, I'm assuming this is the City of Board of Health regulations for keeping hens. That's still valid now?
Yes, that's the document that we had, although it should have been amended to eliminate, and I don't know what copy you're looking at, but it should have been amended to, sorry. It should have been amended to eliminate the Board of Health permit process and replace it with a City Council special permit process. And I see Crystal has her hand up, so she may have more to offer here. Crystal?
Right. I just wanted to point out that the Board of Health regulations still need to get approval from the Board of Health. They can't pass anything just by a document. It actually has to go to the board for a full vote. So that's still pending. Even though it's incorporated here, this ordinance really won't take full effect until the board can approve those regulations.
Thank you for that.
And just one note to make sure that they change the abutter to 300 feet, because they also have abutters at 100 feet.
Right, and I think that their abutters, the whole abutter section is probably going to be eliminated because we have taken over the noticing through the special permit requirement. There shouldn't be any more need to refer to abutters in the Board of Health regulations because we are doing the special permit process. Councilor Murphy, are you all set? Should I move on?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So violations, any person who keeps, feeds, or shelters an animal in violation of this section shall be subject to a fine not more than $50 for the first violation, $100 for the second, and $300 for the third or subsequent offense. If the Board of Health or its agents determines the disturbance or damage to the property or surrounding properties or public areas to be egregious or severe, or the violation is endangering the animals, the hens may be immediately removed at the owner's expense. There shall be a hearing authority for appeals composed of the director of the Board of Health, one disinterested party of the Board of Health, and one member of the law department, in parentheses, solicitor. A separate agent of the Board of Health may sit in for the director if he or she is unable to attend.
Councilor Lisi?
Yes?
Under B, perhaps we should add, and the special permit, if approved, shall be removed or withdrawn.
I'm going to ask Crystal what she thinks, because I think that I think that this section C is there because the hearing authority allows for an appeal to take place. So B may happen, but there may be an appeal of that action. And so I think it's only after the appeal fails that we would then remove the special permit. But I'll ask again.
I'm not, I don't care if it goes under B or C, but if an action is taken where they violated this, then their special permit should be withdrawn at the end of the day. So it would perhaps belong under C. If
Crystal,
appeal fails.
Crystal, do you want to give us some guidance on how, if that would be a D altogether, or if that is a, another clause of C?
I mean, that's part of the hearing process. We need to make sure that, it was them that violated it, it wasn't, I can see what you're saying. If it's something so egregious that we feel that the animals need to be removed, certainly we want to look into whether or not their permit should also be revoked, but I can't come up with any, theoreticals off the top of my head right now, but I can imagine, things happening where the animals may need to be removed, but they could agree to certain terms to allow their permit to stay in place and to then get the animals back potentially. I think that would all become part of the hearing process as far as what would happen to their permit or the animals in general. So to start laying out all the potentials of what could come of that hearing process, I think will get lengthy. So certainly it'll come up in that annual renewal of their permit. If nothing else happens, that'll allow for those minutia.
Thank you.
Okay. I think this is the end here. So section 2, all ordinances or part of ordinances inconsistent herewith are hereby repealed, and this ordinance shall take effect upon passage.
So where's the part about the fees?
The fees are up here. They're not, sorry, I'm looking for it. I thought it was in red, but maybe it's accepted all the changes by now. The fees were up here. I'm gonna make it smaller so it's easier for me to see, Councilor Vacon, and then I'll make it larger again.
I just didn't see that part of, under the special permit.
Well, we don't have to outline the fees because it's all embedded in the special permit process. If we're not waiving the fee, then the fees are what they are.
But in the last version, my understanding was the fees had been waived on a 3-2 vote.
Yes, that's what I thought also. But the version that we're looking at here, it didn't include the waiver. So there's no fees delineated because they're all part of the special permit process. What we did outline to note is that public hearing notices must be published in the paper, and the special permit, if approved, will need to be recorded with the Hampden County Registry of Deeds.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things that we outlined.
So there will be the $100 processing fee as this is written.
As this is written, yes. Counselor Hernandez has her hand up. You could go ahead, Libby.
Thank you so much. So I'm a little bit confused now because I thought that we were aiming at trying to waive the $100 fee because it was possible to do if we really wanted to do it. And so now I'm confused as to the fact that it's not being discussed and now the fee is there. Are we going to attempt at trying to modify this before we bring it back to the full city council?
Well, we can. I mean, it's up for discussion, and that's why we're going through it with a fine-tooth comb here. Right now, again, it's the special permit process, and the fees are embedded in the process. You know, I think that it's become a real sticking point, and one of the things that comes out as a difference between the special permit process and the Board of Health process is that the Board of Health process would require a $25 fee on an annual basis for the inspections, as far as I recall. Let me take a quick look. It was $20.
But every year.
I'm trying to find if it was every year. The annual keeping of hens, here it is. Permit holders will need to renew. Additionally, an annual inspection will be conducted by the Board of Health. And it just talks about regulations and late fees, but it doesn't say that there would be a fee for the renewal and for the new. It doesn't say that. It just says for the application that there would be a $20 application fee that is non-refundable. And then it goes on to talk about the decisions. And then the annual keeping of hens permit will be required. And a renewal permit would need to be obtained. Yeah, so it seems like it would be a $20 per year fee. And this would be a one-time fee of $100. If you fail to renew your permit prior to June 30th, this is the old version, by the way, when it was a Board of Health permit. So if you failed to renew your Board of Health permit prior to June 30th, you are subject to a $25 late fee. Additionally, an annual inspection will be conducted by the Board of Health, and failure to meet the requirements set forth by these regulations may result in a fine up to $100. So I am reading that as a $20 a year renewal fee. So, I mean,
go
ahead, Councilor
Madam
Hernandez.
Chair?
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So if we move, and I know that this is a sticking point that a lot of councilors probably would vote it down just because of this $100, permit fee that we're trying to waive here. So if we keep the $100 one-time permit fee, then the $20 renewable fee every year wouldn't apply?
Right. We are substituting an annual $20 a year fee for a one-time $100 fee.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
So the Board of Health doesn't
advertising. Sorry, I just want to make sure it's clear, like not to mention the advertising and the recording of the permit that needs to happen.
Right.
And then Counselor Vacon?
Are we sure the Board of Health doesn't charge for inspections?
They don't charge for inspections. It says that it would be a permit fee.
Right, right. But I just don't know if in general, when people have animals, if the Board of Health charges for the inspections. I just don't know that.
They don't. I believe that what Sean was saying was that he would assess the application fee to be $20, and that would be able to cover the administrative work as well as the inspections that his office would have to conduct. So in this case, we're getting $100 upfront, and that's the money that the applicant has to pay, and that goes to support the general fund, and we'll just have to have a budget that is
I get that on the front end. I just wasn't sure about the ongoing inspections that they do. That was all.
No, I don't see anything here that talks about a specific fee for an inspection. It was just the application fee, and that application fee would have to be reapplied every year.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, Councilor Murphy, is that you that you wanted to speak?
No.
No. Yeah. So I think at this point in time, we've heard that this is like one of the last pieces of contention among the counselors for how we're going to proceed. I like the idea of creating more harmony in our ordinances as opposed to like carving out the exceptions. I do also want to create an affordable process for folks. I do understand at the same time, the novelty of what we're doing, and that we want to do it well and meet counselors' concerns until we can otherwise prove that this is an easy process to follow, or if it's a difficult process and it has to be amended. But let's get something on the book so that we can get people sort of working with what we have and providing the necessary feedback based on the experiences of both the residents and the council in the process. So if there's no other amendments or comments, we all just went through the document line by line, and if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that it gets sent to the full city council meeting. Is that how it's supposed to go?
That we approve the ordinance as amended.
That we approve the ordinance as amended.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve as amended. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll be a no.
4-1 on the ordinance. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, that was a quick second. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thanks everyone for your work tonight. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
on Tuesday if not.